Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video. We're going to be looking at a game called Relooted. It's Xbox Game Pass's newest day one release. This is part of a series where you look at every single Xbox Game Pass day one release for the entire year to see if Xbox Game Pass is worth €360. Starting off with the thumbnail of this video, because I know people are going to have read that and go, is this game pandering? Is this game genuine? There's literal articles from the BBC about this game. When I looked up this game, there was like thumbnails being like, this game is racist, you know. Did I experience that as a white person who played this game that is obviously centered more towards Africans and African Americans? That's what this game clearly is centered towards. No, to be honest, I genuinely played the game. I played a vast majority of it. I didn't finish the game, but throughout the hours I put into it, there was no quote or line that made me feel personally attacked as a white European at any point. Which was nice because, to be honest, I was expecting to go in and have that experience. Did the game pander at times? Absolutely. But I also want to say, while you're going back and you're stealing back the artifacts from these countries that, you know, they're saying stole the artifacts. I'll get into that later if they're truly considered stealing or not. The artifacts they were taking in the game were historically accurate. The statistics they used in the game were all historically or actual accurate to real life statistics. So they didn't lie in the game, basically, which I think is really, really important because that's what I expected. I expected to go in here, and to be honest, as someone who's a bit of a history nerd, I expected there to be a lot of lies, a lot of misinformation, and there actually genuinely wasn't a lot of lies or misinformation throughout the game. So I was really impressed with that, and that's why I don't consider it to be pandering, because there was clearly work put into it. I would say where the game pandered more was towards the actual gay community than anything else, because there was just pride flags everywhere and the rainbow flag everywhere. And I have multiple gay friends, and I don't find that they find that to be inclusive. As an Irish person, whenever I see an Irish person in a video game or a movie, I normally actually hate it because they normally really misrepresent what an Irish person is. And for a lot of my gay friends, they feel the very same way about video games and movies because they find that it's not actually accurately representing them as a person at all. And I also don't believe, and I think where this game does go wrong, is I don't believe you need to be from Africa to relate to an African person. Maybe relate's the wrong word, but to be empathetic towards someone from Senegal or Nigeria or wherever, I don't think you need to be from there. Just like I don't think anybody needs to be Irish to feel empathetic towards the famine. And I think that's where this game goes wrong, and a lot of these kind of stories go wrong. It's the idea that they don't believe that other people could feel empathetic or other people can understand a situation just because they haven't gone through that situation. And I think that's where this game might go wrong in that scenario. But other than that, I would really argue the game didn't pander, and the actual gameplay of the game was actually okay. Let's dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly of the game, starting off with the good. So now that we put the pandering aside, let's focus on what was actually good about this game and actually give it the review that it deserves. So number one, the music. Really love the music. I don't know if anyone played Civilization 5, and when you open up the Civ 5, you would get Babietti playing. That was kind of the vibe of the music in this game. It was just really chill, just something you kind of nod your head along to, but also kind of like hooked you into the game a little bit. So, and I very rarely compliment music in a game, but in this case, it really stood out, and I actually think it was one of its best features. On top of that, the story. Story is a really rare thing for me to compliment as well, because for me, if I look at like the greatest games I've played, like Skyrim's one of my favorite games, the story in Skyrim's shit. I don't think a main story is that important if the gameplay is amazing. I can think of a lot of games where the main story was crap, but the gameplay was great, so it just carried it through. And in this case, the gameplay was okay. It was simple, but enjoyable. But the story is what carried this game. If you weren't into the story in this game, I don't think there's even a point in picking it up. But if you could get yourself into the story, start enjoying what was going on, get yourself hooked into the artifacts, where they came from, the history behind them, you could really see yourself enjoying this game. And I genuinely did have a good time playing it. I feel like if you're somebody that feels really strongly about the fact that African artifacts have been taken from Africa and are in museums in France and around the world, this game could really resonate with you from a story point of view, and I feel like you could really enjoy it. I'm not someone who feels like that, and I do want to say that quickly. Like, in Ireland, we have Roman stuff in our museums. In England, there's Roman stuff in their museums. Are Italy coming back to claim that? No, I don't necessarily just believe just because something's from a different country or from a different region that another country can't have it in their museum. I don't really buy into that argument, and I think it's false. And I think if I look up, and I did look up for this video, Morocco and Tunisia, they have artifacts that are Spanish because they raided the Spanish coastline for many years. I mean, Morocco, at one point, it would have been called the Maghreb Empire, I believe at the time, owned Spain. And so they have many Spanish artifacts within their museums, and that's totally fine because that's part of history. So I don't really have an issue with that as much, but if you could relate to that from a story point of view, I feel like you were going to enjoy the story even more. I just enjoyed the history of the artifacts more than the actual story of, hey, we're criminals and we're going to go steal these artifacts. It really is more of a story game, and I have that point here highlighted really heavily. It really is more of a story game than a gameplay game. The gameplay was smooth and fun at times. You're like parkouring, you're working out the layout of this house or building that you're essentially going to heist and then steal this artifact or multiple artifacts. So you have to like work out your route. But to be honest, the game shows you exactly where your route's not going to work once you get far enough in. It just shows you a line of what you need to follow and a little exclamation mark where you're not, if your route's not going to work essentially to get out. And so over time through playing the game, it really becomes a bit more of an automative experience, and you definitely are playing more for the story than the actual gameplay, because you really are just doing certain tasks just to tick boxes rather than actually doing anything engaging or anything that requires a lot of thinking or any real manual gameplay. Let's jump in with the bad now. That was kind of the good side of the game. I actually really do think the gameplay did genuinely surprise me, and even the Steam reviews will say the gameplay was actually okay, and I didn't expect that to be the case when I watched the trailers. Let's dive in with the bad. So looking at the bad of this game, what didn't I enjoy? I didn't enjoy the fact that, as I said earlier, the gameplay was smooth. There was this parkour element where you kind of would click buttons and you would kind of gain momentum and fly through these levels, and that felt really, really enjoyable. But then there was moments in the levels where you needed to like call on an ally, essentially someone you'd befriended through the game, and they would help you get past a door or grapple up somewhere, or a robot would pop out and hack a security camera. That was all nice, but I would have rather, if I had the abilities as a character to do those things, like I would have rather have the grapple hook. I would have rather had the ability to hack the camera. I would have rather had the ability to hack the door, because it just slowed the gameplay down. It made it feel a bit lethargic. It just kind of interrupted the gameplay for me, honestly. And I would have just much preferred if it was me doing those things rather than having to bring in the side characters to do it. I guess it did add an extra layer of complexity to the game, but I just think the gameplay was so simple that I don't even think trying to make it more complex even worked. I was like, this game worked because of its story, not because of its gameplay. So I think focusing on trying to make the gameplay more, honestly, complex is the wrong word in my opinion, tedious is the word I would actually use, doesn't really help the game. Next, you also had way too many training missions. For the first like 5-6 missions, every time I complete a mission I have to go back to the training thing, learn a new thing, and then go back in and do another mission. It just really cut up the game in a horrible way, in my opinion. Like, yes, the story was continuing through the training, but I was just like, I just wanted to go on my next mission, and then I was like, all right, I'm here in the training learning this new mechanic. Just teach me the mechanic through the missions, don't teach me the mechanic in training. It's just not an interesting way to do it. I felt like I ended up playing 5, 6, 7 tutorials, and that's not fun. I hate tutorials. Anyone who's watched my reviews knows I generally skip the tutorial and I just learn the game through the game. And yeah, this game in particular, it just didn't work. I really hated it. So that cut up the game a lot as well and made, again, kind of tedium to the game that didn't need to be there. Next, they just tried far too hard to justify the fact that these people were criminals. Like, at one point, they steal this guy's grandfather's Olympics medals, and they're like, well, your grandfather owned these medals, so they're yours, really. And it's like, well, no, what happened was you left the country, from what I gathered. Your grandfather left his medals to no one, from what we know of the story, and essentially they eventually got auctioned off. There's nothing wrong with that. I have a granddad, he has a house. If my granddad passed away and nobody claimed his house and he left it to no one, and then we came back to Ireland in 30 years and tried to take the house, it would probably have been auctioned off. Everything in it would have probably been sold off, and like, I can't just go and steal everything from that house. Like, that's not how that works. So like, it consistently tried to justify criminal acts, and at one point they start working with like smugglers and things like that, and again, it's all justified, and I'm like, I don't agree with that line. I think this game would have played better if they just owned up to who their characters were being, rather than trying to justify being criminals the whole time. Like, you can't work with smugglers who could be smuggling in drugs, people, fucking anything that isn't helpful for society, and then be trying to act like you're the good guys. You just don't get to make that argument. So I felt like that was a weak area. I also just really hated a lot of the haircuts in this game. I'll put up the ones I hate. I can't remember the character's name, and I just hated it. It reminded me like the Hunger Games. It was just awful. Really didn't like them at all. Some of them were fine, but like some of them were also really fucking awful, and just felt like they were trying to be like gimmicky for the sake of being gimmicky. I know that's a weird thing to complain about, but there's just nothing worse when you see a character in screen like, you look stupid. So anyway, diving in with the ugly next. So finally we have the ugly. For everyone who watches my reviews, you know that I do the good, the bad, and the ugly. What does the ugly represent? I actually haven't stated that before in a review. The ugly represents what can be changed in the future about a game. The bad is the stuff that's fundamental and something that I don't see changing even if the game has 5 more years of development. The ugly is stuff that I think is going to be changed or could be changed in the future if there was fan pressure and stuff, etc. So let's start off with the character facial expressions were awful. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers the Mass Effect Andromeda drama, but the character faces in that are very similar to the character faces in this. At times, like, they're talking and their mouth and the words are not matching up at all. Like, their mouths are making these weird shapes. It was just really bad. The animations around the faces were really, really bad a lot of the times. Maybe that's something they'll fix within an update or two, but that's the experience I had, and it was pretty terrible. And then finally, this is something I normally wouldn't speak about because of the nature of this game being a game that's clearly quite focused on racism and historical racism. They had a character named Feng. Now, I'm not sure if Feng was South African or Asian, and I have been to South Africa, and I know the South African accent is quite unique. But this really did feel a little bit on the line of a bit racy, a bit xenophobic. The accent was just very overly saturated. It felt like someone attempted to do like an Irish. When I get offended by people trying to do Irish accents and they're just terrible, that's what it felt like. And I wasn't sure if he was trying to be South African or if they were making a really horrible Asian accent, because the Feng is meant to be Asian. Because I think Feng is an Asian name. I've seen like characters in shows and TV shows who are Asian be called Feng. So if he's meant to be Asian, then that accent is really, really, really bad. So that was kind of something where I was a bit like, that was definitely quite dodgy, and would definitely be something I would get another voice actor to redo that accent, because even listening to it, it was hurting my ears at times. I was like, this sounds just way over the top, and to have like one of your only white characters in your thing have a really over dramatized accent does just come off a bit weird when you're kind of focused on being anti-racism and stuff like that, etc. So look, that's my review. I would recommend, how would I say this? If you are somebody who is African American or you're from Africa and you feel like this game would relate to you, I think it's definitely worth an evening or two playing this game, because that's all that's really in it gameplay wise. 1 or 2 evenings, maybe 3 evenings, depending on how much time you're putting into it each day. So if you have that kind of time, if this game's intrigued you, the gameplay looks good, obviously watch some other reviews. I always recommend people to take more than just one opinion. Then I would recommend this game. If you're someone who isn't interested at all in ancient artifacts, history, the gameplay isn't going to grab you in this game. It's fine, it's decent, but it's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing that's like addictive. You know, I don't have an itch to go back and play the gameplay. I have more of an itch to go back and complete the rest of the story. That's more what my itch is there to scratch. So look, thanks for watching this, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please subscribe, please like, share, anything, everything helps. Even, you know, leave a comment as well. Like, I absolutely love reading the comments, even if they're really shitty and nasty. I still like reading them, especially if they're like good constructive criticism. So please do leave a comment if you have one. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and see ya.